Hello and welcome along to another interview from the Honest Football Podcast. Again this week we're lucky to speak to a former professional, and this man is Ian Herring. Made his name in non-league after playing for hometown club Swindon at an early age. Ian's got experience and has become a cult hero at a number of brilliant non-league clubs, culminating in his spell as player manager and manager at Hungerford Town. As well as his playing career, Ian talks to us about management, being involved at non-league and some of the trials and tribulations you have to go through, and just how much of the off-the-pitch stuff you have to do that you wouldn't normally worry about at the higher level. For grassroots and non-league coaches, I'm sure this one's a must-listen. Ian's also an ambassador for IVF charity IVF Babble, and also speaks brilliantly about mental health and the importance of it both in football and in general life. Ian is available on Twitter if you want to talk to him about mental health or IVF. A brilliant gentleman with a fantastic attitude to football. We really hope you enjoy this one. If you do, please put a thumbs up on the video and subscribe to the channel for regular interviews, matchday vlogs once we can go back to games, and other content and topical podcasts from us. But this is Ian Herring's footballing story, and we really hope you enjoy it.
And I'm delighted to say that Ian's with us now. So, Ian, thanks very much for giving up your time. I know you've been working today in that sort of beautiful hot day, so I appreciate you coming back and speaking to us today. So thanks very much for that.
No problem, Charlie. My pleasure.
So, obviously, the series is my favourite game, and we're going to sort of build up to that point. But what we always do whenever we speak to particularly people who play professionally is just find out where that journey began for you, really. So what was your first ever memory of football, be it watching it on TV or kicking a ball in the back garden? Where did that journey begin for you as a footballer, really?
Oh, blimey, takes me back. When I've got an older brother, my brother's 3 years older than me, so I was always sort of as a kid looking up to him, and we were fortunate enough, although we didn't have a great deal when we was children, we had a huge back garden, and my dad it was big enough to have a bit of a five-a-side pitch on it, and my dad sort of made us goalposts out of drain pipes when we was kids. So from as young as I can remember, really, it was playing with my brother in the back garden, and it was normally, because I was the youngest, I was normally in goal.
Do you remember watching anything on TV, like your first sort of game on television or sort of first major tournament or something like that?
Not so much on TV, like I say, because of my older brother as well. We were Swindon fans. My dad was a Swindon supporter. It's our hometown club, and we didn't miss a game home and away for 3 seasons. So my sort of live football, my sort of best memories were from with my brother and my dad going to watch Swindon. And I think that was way back when I was about 6-7 years old, on the run up to Swindon getting promoted to the Premier League. So they're my sort of best memory or earliest memories of live football, and sort of the away coaches doing the sweepstake, and a few sort of events that happened in away games and stuff. I fell over one time, and the whole crowd were singing "She Fell Over." So is at about 5 years old. So yeah, that's my earliest memories of live football.
It's quite baptism of fire, that, isn't it? So obviously you then went on to play for Swindon, which, being your hometown club must have been some sort of, an amazing feeling. But before that sort of debut in that, that game, how did that sort of journey come about? How did you end up at Swindon in the first place, essentially, from sort of going from your back garden to then playing for the first team?
I signed for Stratton Juniors, a local club. Played for them up until, obviously, the sort of rules regarding young children have changed now, but back then it was I got picked up for Swindon from Stratton when I was about 11, but I could continue playing for Stratton until I was 13, so I was combining playing for Stratton with Swindon from about 11 onwards.
Right.
I stayed with Swindon and then stopped playing for Stratton at 13, stayed with Swindon up until I left school, but I actually got released from Swindon, funnily enough, when I left school. So I went on trial to Reading, didn't get in at Reading, went on trial to Portsmouth, didn't enjoy it at Portsmouth. They invited me back for another week, didn't sort of feel welcome there, so didn't want to go. And then during those 2 trials, I think Swindon got wind that I was going on trial there, and invited me back in and offered me a non-contract scholarship, which I accepted. And then so I was with Swindon for 3 years, and I eventually got released again for a second time, went out on loan to Salisbury and then Chippenham. Swindon had some injuries, so I got called back again, and then fortunately made my full debut away at Crewe, and was offered a 6-month pro after that.
Right. What's that sort of in that sort of youth setup? What's the sort of big differences? I know obviously there is an obvious difference between that and say being around in and around the sort of first team, but I suppose in terms of competition for places and trying to get, is it a different sort of environment and different vibe around that sort of the two teams, if that makes sense, like the youth setup and then obviously the first team?
Yeah, I've got to be honest. I think the sort of transition from the youth setup into the first team was probably a bit easier back then. Nowadays, there's sort of the 23s development football, and back then, so it was under 17s team and under 19s, and they'd done a 3-year scholarship. But along with that, alongside playing for the 17s or the 19s, there was the reserve side as well, where you're playing with the first team players that aren't in the squad at the weekend, etc. But also you're playing against other first team players as well. So you're getting that sort of feel for sort of adult football or the first team sort of football in the reserve. So back then, I think the sort of transition into the first team was easier, but a lot more kids probably got released a lot younger back then, and I understand why they brought the 23s in to try and give kids more of a chance, to the late developers more of a chance. But I think it's gone the other way in the sense of the 23s football isn't very competitive. But what I touched on earlier, I went out on loan also to Salisbury and then Chippenham. And that's, for me, was the best thing that I ever done. And that prepared me very well for men's football and making the step up into the first team.
Yeah. So obviously then you made first team appearances for Swindon and eventually ended up back in sort of Salisbury and that level of football. What is the biggest difference? Obviously going from full-time, football league football to then, playing against teams who are part-time and the whole sort of thing and the transition for that really. What was that like? Because I suppose you had that experience of being there on loan, but then going back there sort of full-time. What was the sort of major differences between the two?
Just the speed and the speed and the fitness of the players, and obviously the organisational aspect, because obviously one thing you've got a professional setup is that time. You can train 5, 6, 7 days a week if you want, but obviously the part-time people are combining it with work and you're only training 2 evenings a week. If you add that into a midweek game as well on a Tuesday, you've got one training session on a Thursday. So the full-time environment and especially the Swindon first team, it was very much, especially for me, although on loan at Salisbury and Chippenham, it was proper men playing men's football, the rough and tumble of that. When you sort of stepped up to the Swindon Town first team, it was another level. Like Sam Park and Tommy Mooney, and they were exceptional footballers. And you had to put the graft in and make sure you could cope with that. Otherwise you get found out.
So in terms of that transition from Swindon, then was that your sort of choice to go to Salisbury, or how did that work? Was there other places you could have gone, or?
So I like I said, I got released for the second time. I wasn't offered a pro, but then because of injuries, I come back, made 2 appearances, and done really well. I was man of the match in both, and then was offered a 6-month pro because I was local. And I probably, in hindsight's a wonderful thing. I probably shouldn't have really accepted it. But it's my hometown club. It was on extremely money, but it wasn't about the money, and I didn't have an agent or representatives or anything like that. So in my head, I'm thinking, should I chance my arm somewhere else? But if I don't get a club, another league club, then I'll always be thinking, what if? So I kind of stayed at Swindon. I always think I didn't really get given a great opportunity, but then I look back as well, and I didn't help myself in the sense of when I wasn't in the side, days off, etc. I wasn't doing extra. I was probably drinking a little bit too much and stuff like that, being a young lad. So come Christmas, the end of my 6-month pro, I was released, and I just wanted to play. I hadn't played a lot of football, so Chippenham expressed an interest, which was obviously a drop down to Southern League football. But if my thought process was to drop down, play every week, and then I'll see a league club, and it didn't really work out like that. And obviously, there's so many footballers out there. Once you go down, it's hard to make that step back up again. Yeah,
no, of course. And I suppose in that sense, because we're sort of on the podcast, big fans of non-league, and that's where, me and another lad, Craig, have sort of played, not obviously at the same level as you, anywhere near that, but I suppose that's the most relatable sort of standard that we can, get to in that sense of that. But then going back from that, obviously getting promoted and ended up back in the sort of conference and nearly in the sort of promotion and getting back into the Football League. How does that work in terms of, that sort of transition of going from Southern Premier even then to suddenly you're sort of Conference South and that kind of thing? Is there a big jump between the two? Because you watch it and it doesn't seem, with some teams there is, but other teams there's a huge financial advantage, compared to other teams in the league, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the financial golf is huge. So I left Chippenham. I was at Chippenham for 3.5 years in the Southern Prem, and then I signed for Salisbury for 2 years, who had gone up to the Conference National at the time. So, I was 23 then when I signed for Salisbury, and I'd sort of had a taste of first team. I was captain at Chippenham when I was 19. So that step up to Conference National was I found quite easy without blowing my own trumpet. We had a very, very good side at Salisbury, to be fair. Andy Sandow, Matt Tubbs, Liam Feeney, very good players like that. So I'd spent 2 years there and found it quite comfortable. But then I went to Northwich. Then a few things happened. I was at Eastleigh, Forest Green, and then Eastleigh, and I didn't play a lot of football again. I just wanted to play, come back closer to home, and sign for Hungerford. And we went up twice. And when I went from the Southern Prem to the Conference South with Hungerford, that was the biggest jump that I'd sort of realised and thought, wow, this is quick. And I think the standard of the Conference South has got a lot better over the years, a lot better from when I first sort of played it sort of, I'd say 8-9 years ago.
So obviously then you talk about Hungerford and you've spent a long time there, obviously up until the end of this season, but then eventually becoming like player manager. How did you find that sort of that change? And the only reason I ask is on a personal level, as I say, not at the same level as you, but I ruptured 2 ligaments in my knee, so I can't really play properly anymore. So I went into the coaching side of it. But the first thing I did was then start coaching the team I used to play for, and I actually found that so difficult. I mean, as I say, it's nowhere near the same standard as you, but still the dynamics of your relationships with sort of people. How did you find that then, going from being just a player to then having almost a bit of authority over them, if that makes sense, when you're...
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough for a number of reasons. First of all, I'd done it joint. I was joint manager with John Boardman. That was sort of 4 games into the season. Bobby Wilkinson, the previous manager, had been at the club for sort of 5 years. So there was a lot of stability at the club. So obviously initially we had a good group of lads. They're very professional. Obviously me and John got on with them as players, and we were experienced players as well. We got on with them very well. So the players were brilliant and gave us the utmost respect. The hardest thing was combining the playing with the managing, but I believed I could still do that, and I believe I did do that quite well to a certain degree. But the hardest thing was when Hungerford decided to give me sole charge, and John and the assistant Gary McDonald left the club, and in I think it was around February time, I was asked to cut the budget. So a few months previous, I'm sat in a dressing room with those lads as teammates, and then fast forward a couple of months, I'm their manager, sat opposite a desk with them, asking them, some of them, to take 25% pay cuts and stuff. So that was the hardest thing, and probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my short management career so far. But unfortunately, if you want to be a manager in whether it's football or any industry, the higher up the ladder, the tougher the decisions and the more rubbish you have to deal with. So that's part and parcel of the job, as horrible as it may be. And it's probably, I did learn a lot, and I genuinely feel if you're just honest with people, treat people how you want to be treated, then okay, they might not like it, but they will accept it. If that makes sense.
No, I agree. I think we've spoken to people from different levels of the game all the way down to sort of proper grassroots, and I think the common theme of anyone is just they want a manager who they know where they stand with. I think that's sort of at any level, whether it's the elite level or anything. But in terms of that, then, because you're the first player we've ever spoke to who's been a player manager, how does that work in terms of did you feel it affected performances, or do you feel like you had to try a bit harder? I know that sounds silly because obviously someone like yourself would always give 100% anyway. But do you know what I'm getting at? Like, does it affect your performance?
Yeah. It did towards the end, and I retired from playing for sort of various different reasons. I spoke to a lot of people when I first took the job, and spoke to Darryl Clark, who's now Walsall manager. Spoke to a few others about because Darryl had combined the playing with managing at Salisbury. Spoke to a few others, and there was a lot of people saying you couldn't do it. It was too hard. It was too hard to do player and managing. I believed I could. I just feel I was probably at the wrong club to do it. If excuse me, to do it, if that makes sense, because I believe you have to be on your mettle every week. You do anyway, but especially as a player manager, you have to sort of lead by example. And if I had more support, if I had the ability, and obviously it comes down to finances, and unfortunately Hungerford didn't have the finances for me to have a huge coaching team around me. But I believe if I had a bigger coaching team around me, then there's no reason why I couldn't play for longer. But essentially, like I say, there was a severe lack of finances, which meant I didn't have the ability to bring a lot of coaches in. We didn't have a kit man, so I'm finishing work, picking up the kit, counting the kit, laying the kit out. Then I'm going to play a game of football, and I'm collecting all the kit in, taking it back, and stuff like that. So you turn out, you're ending up doing everything, and you're probably not training as well as you should be, because you're trying to step out a little bit to watch other players. And we had Chippenham away at home last year, and we were 1-0 down after 20 minutes, and I just couldn't pass the toffee, kept giving it away. I ran over to the bench, and Kev Watson, who was my assistant, I said, "I'm bringing myself off, mate." He said, "You can't do that." And I said, if I'm thinking all these different things in my head, then I shouldn't be on the pitch. And I dragged myself off after 20 minutes. Unfortunately, we won 2-1. And I kind of knew then I kept myself fit in case I needed to. But a week before my 35th birthday, I was self-employed. Week before my 35th birthday, my wife was due to be on maternity leave. I played in a friendly and hurt my shoulder. Next morning, I couldn't work, had to go to hospital. So all those things, I'm thinking, you know what? I've got the management I can still do as well. So yeah, it is hard. It's hard to combine it all, and the performances weren't as good as they should be. So essentially, you're letting the team down. So yeah, I had to step away from the playing side.
No, I appreciate being so honest for that, Ian. That's I think that's probably the most frank answer we've ever had on here. So I really appreciate you saying that. But just on that really quickly, because we get people from different, listening from different sort of, a lot of them, fans of football league clubs and beyond that. And people from actually different parts of sort of the world, not in a big heady way. What I mean is in terms of people who are unfamiliar with the workings of like a non-league club. I'm not after any sort of gossip or anything like that, but what are the biggest challenges? You've already alluded to about kit and things like that. But, as an example, even me of sort of a bit of grassroots coaching, sometimes I have like 24 lads turn up and 1/3 of a plastic football pitch to try and do a proper coaching session. Do you know that kind of thing? Like, what are the sort of challenges of working at the level that you do?
It's the what you've just touched on there. It's very similar to what we had at Hungerford. Obviously, we're step 2 is Conference South, but you got to remember Hungerford over the last sort of 10 years, they've come from being a Hellenic club to where they are now. So they've come a long way in a short space of time. Hungerford, I think there's only 6,000 people in the town. It's not really a football town. So the average gate is only probably 200, 250. So the biggest sort of, the biggest hurdles really and the challenges was the time aspect. It's not so much the finances, it's the volunteers. There's a lot of volunteers at Hungerford which the club wouldn't work without those, but the time aspect of people being able to do so much. For instance, like I say, we didn't have a kit man, didn't have a kit, so I'm doing that myself. If it was kind of, if the chairman didn't do it or if I didn't do it, it wouldn't get done. And then so for instance last year I only ever asked for 2 things, and that's whatever the budget may be, however low it is, just make sure it's there for the whole season. Unfortunately, the last 2 seasons that hasn't been honoured. Right. But also the second thing I wanted was a training pitch. The last 2 years we haven't got a training pitch, so we're playing we're training Tuesdays, Thursdays on the pitch. With the weather in the winter, it becomes you can't train. No. So then what do you do? We had a relationship with a gym, 7 weeks, I think, in the run up to Christmas, we had 1 training session on the pitch. We're playing against teams at step 2 who are full time. Hungerford lads were better off probably trying to enter the Olympics at cycling because we were doing. So they're the challenge you've got to overcome, and you try and do things a bit of a different way. And I invested heavily on the psychological side last year, but yeah, there's numerous challenges, but the lack of proper help through volunteers and also, for instance, training facilities. They were the two hardest, really.
Yeah, no, I always find that up to about sort of end of September, you're sort of training that even at grassroots, I mean, it's fine. And then there's this mad scramble, isn't there, to try and get the nearest sort of sports hall or plastic pitch or something like that to sort of, and you've already got all these teams going for it. But yeah, no, again, I appreciate you sort of being so honest about that. And I think it's very relatable to, you know, a lot of clubs. And that's a step 2, like you say, you know, and very relatable to a lot of players like myself at the level I sort of involved in. So I appreciate that. Just on the last sort of question in terms of that football with you, and I'm not after gossip or any details, but leaving Hungerford at the end of the season, are you going to stay in football, do you think, or and you don't, you know, not after wear or anything like that, but is that your sort of plan to stay in the game?
Yeah, 100%. I'd say 4 or 5 years ago, I was sort of questioning my love for football and if I was falling out of the love of the game, but I never did. I've fallen out. I fell out of love with certain people and certain situations in football, and there's some not nice situations and not nice people in the game, unfortunately. I suppose that's the same as any industry, any walk of life. But I love the game. I love football. It's something I've done since I can remember being a nipper. And yeah, what aspect that will be, I don't know. Obviously, I'm extremely grateful and extremely fortunate to dip my toe in the water for 3 years at being manager at Hungerford at step 2, and I've learned a huge amount. But there's so many managers out the game. I don't want to be dropping down. I want to manage at the same level or higher. But there's an awful lot of managers out the game. But I'm employed now. I've got myself fit. I've lost over a stone in weight. I'm probably the lightest I've ever been since I was 23 years old. So who knows when the season's going to start. If the right management opportunity doesn't come along, I can play, whatever level that may be. But also if an opportunity comes along to help somebody out and coach, then great. But 100%, I've had so much out of the game of football that I'd like to give something back if possible.
Yeah, no. I think that's it'd be a shame. You know, someone like yourself, you need more people like you in the game at whatever level that is. So I think it's, you know, best of luck with that in that sense. Just something you sort of alluded to earlier, and you know, and it's related to football, but we sort of, it's probably one of the few interviews where we'll move on to sort of non-footballing stuff. You mentioned about the sort of mental side of the game, the psychology side of it. You know, I recently read you were saying about sort of there's lots of one-to-one coaching sessions in terms of, you know, especially in this lockdown, you know, people's ability and stuff, but actually in terms of mental health and mentoring, that kind of thing. Is that something that you hold, obviously very dear, but in the level of the game you're involved in, how much contact do you have with the players and how easy is it to sort of check in with, you know, lads' mental health and how they're coping in that sort of sense? And even outside of that, I suppose, even outside of football.
I could talk all day about it, and it's I've always been, so from what I've gone through in my life, I've got a close family member that used to be a heroin addict. My mum's manic depressive, got bipolar. It's very well known, and obviously, you know, I've been through, me and my wife have been through IVF, was unsuccessful the first time. So I'm huge on sort of mental health and well-being. And obviously I touched on earlier as well that I got released from Swindon 3 times. So I sort of know how it feels to deal with rejection. And then it was that sort of this year, just before Christmas, I think it was, Hungerford introduced a GPS vests. And around the same sort of time, I got a life coach, somebody that's remains anonymous, has helped me out personally, which has helped the team out. So I invested heavily in sort of certain things and certain training methods that and sort of group sessions where I was kind of trying to give the players empowerment and a dressing room where every voice was valued, and essentially trying to adopt that these lads are people first, players second. So that's kind of the route I was going down. And then when we brought the GPS vests in, it made me think, do you know what? I'm downloading the GPS data, I'm watching the lads' performance on video, I'm watching the opposition. Everything physical is monitored. What do we monitor mentally? I had 2 players. One player come into me personally with anxiety issues. Another player was wanting to quit college and start an apprenticeship and didn't know how to go about it, and had an discussed it with his mum and dad and stuff like that. Then another player suffering serious confidence issues. So then I'm thinking, hold on a minute. Yes, I can help these players out to a certain degree, but where's that specialist help, if that makes sense? But also, there's it's got better, and there's, for instance, the Prince William documentary last night. There's a lot more people talking about it, but still in that macho environment of when you're in a dressing room, 18, 19, 20, even any age lad, bloke, people find it hard to just say, I'm struggling, I'm in trouble. Even though you can provide them that confidential help, you can get those players' trust. And especially if it comes from a manager, how honest are those players going to be? Are they going to come to the manager, say, Gaffer, I'm struggling, da-di-da-di-da, because essentially all they want to do is play at the weekend, because for some of them, release. And then will the manager sort of think that's a weakness and not play, if that makes sense. So for young players, young men, young women as well, there's a lot of things for them to go through. So I kind of devised a system which was 100% confidential. So after each game, I asked the players to give me a score on 10 different points between 1 and 10. Right. So it was how well they slept the night before a game, 10 being good, 1 being not so good. Their nerves before a game, their enjoyment during the game, their tactical understanding, and sort of 5 or 6 other points. So the idea behind that was, and the players had to do it 100% honestly for it to work. And I believe they did through some of the scores, because obviously if you've had a bad game, are you going to send through a score that, one, you're not sleeping well? And I did have some players do that, which was very good. So I believe that the players we had bought into it. But it gives you the opportunity to monitor how they're feeling about their game, about their performance, obviously their emotions as well. To then, if you look at it, look through it all, and you think, hold on, he's not sleeping well. He's very nervous before a game. He's not enjoying it. Add to that to the GPS data that he isn't hitting the levels energy-wise that he could be. Is there an opportunity to say, hold on a minute, there might be a bigger issue here? And can that give a manager or a coach the opportunity to go to that player? Is everything okay? And that might be the trigger that player needs for him to open up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think, that sounds genuinely amazing. And I really do, I sort of wish, in football environments I've been in, that was available. Is that quite common across a lot of clubs at your sort of level, or is that something that, you're probably more of a figurehead for in that sense, I suppose? Or
I know it's
hard for you to say, but it's,
Yeah, obviously all managers do things different ways, and certain people say they do certain things with psychology and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think I'm probably a first to do that. Oxford United, they work with Gary Bloom. I had a discussion with him briefly, but obviously it's finances for Hungerford. But Oxford, Gary Bloom works with Oxford United, and for me that should be a shining light. It should be like a belief beacon for all of football. Because I look at it, there's a lot of cliches in football, and there's the old one, happy off the pitch, happy on the pitch. Well, how do we ensure people are happy off the pitch? I genuinely believe if you invest in these lads, in emotionally invest in them and make sure they feel comfortable in their environment, they feel emotion, you're looking after them emotionally and mentally, then surely that can, if they are happy, that can get better performance levels physically. That makes sense. I don't know. I don't think there's if there's many clubs out there doing that sort of thing. It's partly the reason why I left Hungerford, because I haven't got the skill set. It's something that I want to do. I'd love to go back to university to learn psychology, but it's 20 grand to do a degree nowadays. To do that, and the 3 years out of my life. So I'm looking at other avenues that I can go down, but I genuinely believe that, especially non-league clubs, and it would come at a cost. It should be factored into the budget, that there should be specialist psychological support for all players, because other big businesses, they do that. Football clubs want to be run like a business, so let's start treating these players how you treat employees, and rather than just having them on non-contract. If you've got your budget wrong, just get rid of them like a piece of meat. It's me. They're human beings. I think football's got to wake up and start treating people right.
Yeah, no, I mean, you answered the next question, which I was going to say, how do we move forward as a sort of as a sport at all levels, really? And I think, you've answered that sort of perfectly. I think on a personal level, the lowest I felt, and it's obviously something, you'd relate to in your level as well, is when sort of injuries, when I sort of did my knee properly and then sort of, whatever happens, the upshot of all of that, not being involved in the changing rooms, just being around, at whatever level, being around a football club, whether it is grassroots or, even probably the elite level. I suppose with the elite level in terms of the Premier League and that, there's a bit more of that, like you say, the money. And I think when you're trying to balance that with work, I mean, I was a school teacher and I wasn't actually allowed to go into work even when, because of insurances and all that kind of thing. So for me, my mental health really struggled when I was injured. I never earned money out of the game at any point, So I think it's that kind of thing. If it's almost mandatory to have that, probably more so with the level you're working at because of the pressures of, maybe the games are, is a bit more at stake than maybe, my sort of grassroots stuff. But that sort of principle, though, of that. And I think injuries particularly, that was something we spoke about as a podcast months ago now, but just the impact at any level, it really does affect you, doesn't it? And I didn't really know who to talk to and how to do it. But
definitely, football's the same at whatever level, whether you're right at the top or you're playing on a Sunday. The sort of the emotion for individuals and groups are still the same. And when you get injured, obviously depending on the severity, I've done my medial ligaments 3 times. I think I was out for 8 to 10 weeks for each one, and I broke a metatarsal in my foot, which and I'd been offered a contract, was in negotiations, played, and then broke my metatarsal, contract taken off the table, and I'm out for 13 weeks. When you are injured, it can be tough because especially even when you're on a contract at, say, a professional club, yes, you still looked after financially, but kind of a lot of clubs you're not spoken to. You're in early, the earliest. You leave the latest, and the first manager don't want to know you. He only wants to know and help that first team out, and it can be extremely lonely, and essentially your body's broken down on you for whatever reason, and obviously the severity of it, you might not be able to do what you once was capable of, and that can be extremely hard.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that I missed the most. Was I think what I realised is football, a club moves on very quickly. Unfortunately, and actually, I think obviously we're a lot more aware of it now. But I think I would have maybe it'd have been. I mean, it's about 4 years ago nearly I did it, but I don't quite feel at that time there was as much about that sort of thing about being able to talk to. And do you know what it was for me? It was just even if the lads are sort of text me and. I was actually captain when I did it. I fell down some stairs. I wasn't even playing football. But the principle I'm getting at is like just to keep involved. And I think moving forward, that's one thing I would always say to people. If you've got someone who gets injured, whatever level it is, like don't forget about them. Don't leave them behind.
No, definitely, 100%. Obviously, whenever I was injured, or if I wasn't in the squad, I'd always travel because that was me. I loved being around the lads, but. I was fortunate that every club I was at, the manager allowed that to happen because some clubs, some managers, if you're not in the squad, if you're injured, they don't want you around on days because they see you as a bit of a hindrance. But I think it's a very valid point, and if there are people that are injured, then perhaps players, coaches should possibly look out for make a sort of special effort to look at them a bit more.
Yeah, just true, Nonny, because I'm conscious, you've been at work all day. I don't want to take up all your evening. But just something in terms of, we don't need to discuss it in too much detail, or if you want to. But I know you're obviously an ambassador of something that me and you share, which is, my wife's pregnant at the minute, but that whole sort of IVF journey, and particularly from a male perspective, I think what I found when I sort of started with our sort of journey felt like it was a bit more of a support network for maybe females in that sort of scenario. But just on that, if there is, people listening or sort of watching who are maybe going through that, I know you're an ambassador for an organisation. Just sort of tell us a little bit more about maybe what's on offer and how they can help maybe people who are in a similar situation to sort of us in that sense.
Yeah, it was. So obviously we're fortunate enough to have our Isaac now. It was his first birthday last week, but we sort of faced. I think our journey was about 3.5 years before Natalie sort of fell pregnant, and we sort of discussed having children, etc. And you think it's a given, and then all of a sudden it's hard. And then Natalie had the tests and stuff, and because the issue was with Natalie as well, there was the added emotion for me of she thought I'd leave her for somebody else because she thought she couldn't give us the family that we wanted. So there was a lot of sort of things to go through, and I sort of I was very open with it, and with football I've always sort of spoken my mind, and sometimes that's been to my detriment, and certain things happen in football. You meet a lot of people, and me and Natalie were together quite a while, and certain people at the club were saying throwaway remarks, or when you're having children, they're not got kids yet, and stuff like that, and people think that as a given. And one day I just went, wow, no, we can't actually. We might not be able to. We're going through IVF. And it was a goalie coach actually, and he turned around and said, "Oh, my little one's through IVF."
Right.
So that sort of triggered something in me, and I thought, you know what? The more open I am, the more we talk about it, that kind of might help. And the more I spoke about it, the more people that I'd realised had gone through it, if that makes sense. So anyhow, I started doing a few things. Then we come across the pineapple pin badges, which is the sign IVF Babble. The two girls from IVF Babble have it's a pin badge of two pineapples, basically stronger together. So if you're wearing that, you know what they're going through or have been through, and it's kind of just to try and raise awareness and get people to talk about it and break the stigma, because it even through sort of circles of friends is something that if they might be aware that you're going through IVF, but they find it hard to approach you to talk about. So yeah, we kind of the Hungerford. I was fortunate. Hungerford allowed us to put the pineapple pin badges on our printed onto our kit. So, and then there was a few stories in non-league paper and stuff. So yeah, I've become an ambassador for IVF Babble, and it's an online magazine. But essentially that was a lot for females as well, but they're doing a lot for sort of the males as well. So yeah, there's I think it's ivfbabble.com, and it's on Twitter as well, and they've got, whoever's going through it, they're a great support as well. And I think if there is people that is going through it, I think it's important for them to know that they're not alone, because like I said to you, it can feel quite lonely at times, but they're not alone, and especially it's nothing to be ashamed of, because a lot of people, especially whoever's got the issue, shall we say, there can be emotion of shame, and it isn't nothing to be ashamed of. Unfortunately, it's something that sometimes we can't do nothing about. But there is support out there, and IVF Babble are fantastic. So I'd suggest anyone that is sort of struggling or wants help, then they head over to that.
No, I just wanted to commend you really quickly, because I know we sort of spoke a while back in terms of trying to sort of organise even just doing the interview, but obviously we spoke about the IVF thing then, and I really commend you on how brave you are to sort of be so open about it, because I think particularly in maybe industries we sort of work in, and also in a football changing room, it's not always, or not changing room, but that environment, it's not always the easiest to sort of share anything, but particularly that, because I think that was one thing that I found difficult, was sort of bottling it up and not sort of talking about a very superficial sort of chat, really, in that sense. And
no, I appreciate it, thank you. And my thought process was that if we was open and we help one person to feel a little bit better, then it's a success from us being so open with it, if that makes sense. But yeah, the football world is very, very funny, and that's kind of why I try to make awareness through football with the badges on the shirts. And it's only now that I've begun to realise, as I got a bit older, that if you do show your vulnerability, which a lot of males not just males, a lot of people are scared to show their vulnerability. It's not a weakness to show you're vulnerable. I believe it's a strength. And everyone's vulnerable from time to time, and if you can share those experiences to help others, then that's great.
Yeah, no, thank you. As I say, I mean, you've been a real inspiration to me, so on a personal level, thank you very much for that. But
no, appreciate it, thank you.
But yeah, so on to the last question, obviously the title of the series, which is my favourite game. But obviously, because you're such a public figure and you've been involved at such a good level, we'll give you two, because normally it's just whatever favourite game you sort of watched. But obviously, because you've played at such a good level, it'd be great. It'd be a shame not to hear about that as well. So all I wanted to do is just basically for you to tell us about your favourite ever football match that you've played in, and then one that you weren't involved in, whether it be on the telly or you were at the ground or something like that. So whichever one you want to kick off with first.
So the one I played in was my full debut for Swindon away at Crewe. Obviously, like we touched on earlier, I got released from the club and then got called back, and then all of a sudden I'm making my full debut for Swindon away at Crewe, and sort of it was extremely surreal, and it was the first time I'd sort of walked out in front of about 8,000-9,000 people. And the nerves were there, and I was fortunate enough to have Alan Reeves and Big Matty Hayward next to me, and they were superb, and they sort of talked me through the first sort of 10 minutes, and as the game went on, I sort of grew into it, and we ended up winning 1-0, and it was kind of 100% the best game I've ever played in, and something that I'll never forget.
Did you actually play quite well on a personal level? Because sometimes when we speak to sort of ex-pros particularly, it's like, it wasn't necessarily their best performance, but it's all the other stuff that goes with it, like you just mentioned. What was your sort of performance like?
Yeah, I done okay. I wasn't. I done. I done quite well. I played right wing back. The Crewe Alexander were a good team then. They had Dean Ashton up front playing.
Oh yeah, of course.
They had David Vaughan left back.
Yeah.
I think Rob Holtz was up front as well. So they're a very, very good side.
Yeah.
But at one point in front of their big stand, in front of the dugouts, I think David Vaughan was coming forward at left back, and I'm not afraid of a tackle, and sort of flew in. He went flying over my head, and ref waved play on. So that was sort of that gave me a bit of a lift and something that I forget. But I done okay and kept my shirt for the next game as well. So I can't have done that.
No, exactly. No, that's amazing. And then this one I always find a bit more interesting, because obviously depending on whichever team players happen to support maybe when they're growing up and stuff. But what is the best ever game you've actually ever seen, sort of, whether it be on TV or in the stands or something like that?
It's very hard. It's a hard question because there's so many.
Yeah.
But I'd say Liverpool against AC Milan.
Oh yes.
Although we support Swindon, my dad's a big Liverpool fan as well, and brothers are as well. So I've grown up as a kid with sort of loads of Man United fans, and sort of dad talking about Liverpool back in the day and stuff like that. So to sort of for Liverpool to be 3-0 down and thinking you're out of it and you're going to go home to then going on to win the game and you seeing Liverpool win the Champions League that your dad's talked about doing it 4 times previously. That was sort of that. That's the best game I've seen because of the circumstances, how good Gerrard was, who was idolised sort of thing, and for all those reasons really. Yeah,
I've only seen Gerrard once live, and that was at the because I'm a West Ham fan, so I went to the FA Cup final the following year.
Yeah.
And you just see when you see him in person how he's just an unbelievable footballer. But obviously that game probably was that was him down to a T. He literally carried the whole team, didn't he? So that was
he had everything.
Incredible.
Passing, and tackle, he could shoot, but essentially he led a very poor team to not very poor, but an average team to a European Cup final and sort of grabbed the great game by the scruff of his.
Yeah. No, Ian, I've got to say that was an outstanding sort of chat. I really appreciate you doing that. So thank you very much for today. Just really, really quickly, if anyone wants to sort of keep up with you and what you're doing, I'll put it in like the show notes. But in terms of like social media, is like Twitter and that sort of thing, where's the best place to sort of keep in contact with you? In that
Twitter or Instagram is fine. I can't remember my Instagram. If you put something on the podcast, I'll put a comment on. So Twitter or Instagram. So if it's anything football related or anything to do with IVF, then I'm happy to help chat to anyone.
Yeah, top man, Ian. Thank you so much for that.
No problem. My pleasure, Charlie.